This story will make you think twice about lending a helping hand, especially to your sweet, little old lady neighbor. Mrs. Abernathy, bless her soul, was the picture of kindness. Wrinkles etched a map of life experience on her face, her smile as warm as freshly baked cookies. The only quirk? The constant borrowing. It started small, a cup of sugar for her tea, a screwdriver to fix a loose screw. Always with a twinkle in her eye and a promise to return it first thing tomorrow. Except tomorrow never came. My sugar bowl remained perpetually empty, the screwdriver gathering dust on my shelf. I never pressed it, though. How could you say no to that face? Then came the books. One day, I found a dusty, leather-bound volume on my doorstep, a book I wouldn't recognize in a million libraries. Intrigued, I flipped through the pages, finding faded newspaper clippings tucked between them. Each clipping detailed the disappearance of a former resident of our apartment building, all of them Mrs. Abernathy's contemporaries. A chill snaked down my spine. The borrowed items escalated. A vintage brooch, strangely familiar, materialized on my kitchen counter. A worn-out pair of reading glasses I could have sworn belonged to Mr. Henderson, who vanished from the second floor a year ago. Panic gnawed at me. These weren't just borrowed items, they were fragments of lives. Lives that seemed to coincide with Mrs. Abernathy's unnatural longevity. She hadn't aged a day in the 10 years I'd known her. Fear replaced neighborly kindness. Every misplaced object became a potential clue. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to confront her. Creeping down the hallway, I stopped outside her door, the silence broken only by the rhythmic ticking of an old grandfather clock from within. Taking a deep breath, I knocked. The door creaked open, revealing Mrs. Abernathy, her smile strained, eyes gleaming with an unsettling hunger. "Ah, your name," she rasped, her voice a dry whisper. "Come in, dear. I was just about to borrow." Her sentence trailed off as her gaze landed on the worn leather book clutched in my hand. Recognition flickered in her eyes, quickly replaced by a chilling fury. "You shouldn't have done that," she hissed, her frail frame seeming to vibrate with a sudden, terrifying energy. Before I could react, she lunged, her wrinkled hands reaching for the book. I stumbled back, the book clattering to the floor. As I scrambled to grab it, the newspaper clippings fluttered out, their faded headlines accusing, "Local man disappears without a trace, woman vanishes from apartment building." Mrs. Abernathy's facade crumbled. Her skin stretched taut, her eyes burning with an unnatural light. Terror propelled me back towards my apartment, the image of Mrs. Abernathy's monstrous transformation seared into my memory. Slamming my door shut, I bolted everything in sight. The borrowed objects, now harbingers of a horrifying truth, lay scattered on the floor. This isn't over. Mrs. Abernathy won't stop until she reclaims her borrowed items, and maybe even adds a new one, mine. This charming old lady neighbor is a monster in disguise, and I'm the only one who knows the truth. So, the next time your neighbor asks to borrow something, think twice. You might just be lending them a piece of your life. Ever get the feeling you're living in a dollhouse? I mean, literally. Because that's exactly what happened to me, thanks to my super creepy neighbor, Mr. Blackwood. Now, Mr. Blackwood wasn't exactly social butterfly material. He kept to himself, rarely left his apartment, and had a permanent scowl etched on his face. But his biggest quirk? Dollhouses. Not the cutesy, pastel kind with flowery wallpaper, these were intricate replicas of our entire apartment building, down to the chipped paint on the fire escape. At first, I found them a bit strange, but hey, to each their own creepy hobby, right? Things got weird when I noticed the miniature figures inside. Eerily, they resembled the actual tenants, Mrs. Ramirez with her fluffy white cat, the loud college students on the third floor, even grumpy old Mr. Johnson with his ever-present newspaper. But the one that sent chills down my spine was the tiny figure on the second floor, looking uncannily like me, trapped inside a miniature version of my own apartment. Curiosity gnawed at me. One night, While Mr. Blackwood was away, supposedly on a dollhouse convention, what a nightmare-fuel sentence, I snuck into his apartment. The dusty air hung heavy with the scent of wood polish and something else, something metallic and unsettling. The dollhouses lined the walls, each a meticulously crafted prison for its miniature inhabitants. Panic clawed at my throat as I approached the one with my likeness. The tiny me was banging on the glass walls, a look of desperate terror etched on her face. Then, something unthinkable happened. As I reached out to touch the glass, the world dissolved around me in a dizzying kaleidoscope of colors. The next thing I knew, I was, well, me, but miniature, trapped inside the dollhouse. My tiny apartment felt suffocating. The furniture, once familiar, now loomed over me like grotesque giants. Through the window, I saw Mr. Blackwood, his eyes gleaming with a manic glee as he peered down at me. He wasn't just an artist, he was a puppeteer, controlling the lives of the building's residents through their miniature counterparts. My every move within the dollhouse mirrored downstairs, my actions dictated by his twisted whims. Fear morphed into rage. I wouldn't be his plaything. I started strategizing, using the miniature furniture to build a precarious ladder. It was a long, terrifying climb, but finally, I reached the window. With a desperate surge of strength, I pushed it open, tumbling out onto the miniature fire escape. Mr. Blackwood's face contorted in fury as I rappelled down the building, using miniature vines and drain pipes for handholds. He chased after me, but I was quicker, smaller, harder to catch. Finally, I reached the first floor, the world blurring as I shrunk back to my normal size. Gasping for breath, I scrambled away from his apartment, the sound of his enraged screams echoing behind me. I may have escaped the dollhouse, but the chilling truth remained. Mr. Blackwood's twisted masterpiece wasn't just a hobby, it was a game of life and death. Now, I have to warn the others, break the connection between their lives and the miniature replicas. Because if we don't stop him, we might all become permanent residents of Mr. Blackwood's horrifying dollhouse collection. Let's talk about Mrs. Peabody. Now, on the surface, she was everyone's favorite neighbor, the quintessential cat lady, her backyard a haven for strays. Every lost dog, every abandoned cat, found its way to her doorstep. At first, it was heartwarming. Then, it got a little much. The constant meows and barks became a never-ending symphony of animal needs. One night, curiosity, and maybe a touch of sleep deprivation, got the better of me. I peeked over the fence, expecting the usual menagerie. But what I saw sent a shiver down my spine. The animals, bathed in an eerie moonlight, were arranged in a perfect circle. Their eyes, usually playful or pleading, now glowed an unnatural yellow, fixing on a figure in the center, Mrs. Peabody. She chanted in a language that scraped against my ears, her voice a chilling rasp. Panic surged through me. This wasn't a cat lady, this was something far more sinister. The next morning, the cacophony of barks and meows was replaced by an unsettling silence. The animals, my furry neighborhood companions, were gone. An uneasy feeling settled over me, like a bad omen hanging heavy in the air. Then, the weirdness began. Mrs. Johnson, the perpetually cheerful baker, started rambling about unseen figures whispering her name at night. Mr. Ramirez, the mailman, came down with a strange illness, his skin crawling with what seemed like invisible insects. The once peaceful neighborhood was gripped by a wave of unsettling occurrences. The memories of Mrs. Peabody's ritual flickered in my mind. Connecting the dots, a horrifying realization dawned on me. She wasn't a savior of lost animals, she was a collector, a master of dark magic using the stolen pets as familiars. Their stolen life force fueled her twisted rituals, the source of the neighborhood's sudden descent into madness. Fear gnawed at me, but I knew I had to do something. Research became my new obsession, scouring the internet for anything on dark magic and animal familiars. I learned about the sacrifices, the channeling of energy, the twisted purpose it served. Armed with this knowledge, I knew I had to stop her before she turned our quaint neighborhood into a breeding ground for whatever evil she was unleashing. It's a risky plan, folks. I'm gathering ingredients for a counter-ritual, hoping to disrupt her magic and weaken her. Sneaking around Mrs. Peabody's house, gathering evidence, feels like I'm playing a terrifying game of cat and mouse, except this cat has glowing eyes and a taste for dark magic. This isn't over. The whispers in the night are getting louder, and Mrs. Peabody seems to be aware that someone's onto her game. But I won't back down. For the sake of my sanity, my neighbors, and maybe even the poor stolen pets, I have to stop her. Wish me luck, folks. Because in the battle between a crazy cat lady and a desperate neighbor with a crash course in dark magic, the stakes have never been higher. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. Click on the video on your screen where I am telling 7 Home Alone at Night horror stories. It's a thrill you won't forget.